My name is Bennego Nemerofsky Ramsay. I was born in Montreal. I'm an artist who works with sound and video and involving a lot of text in my work. I'm working on a project at Polin called the Muranowa Lily, and it is a project for the audio guide system of the museum. I've written a story working with an adaptation of a short story by Izaaka Baszewisa Singera, who was a Polish-Jewish writer who immigrated to the United States, Nobel Prize winning writer. And he has a huge oeuvre of literature, short stories, and one of his lesser known short stories is called Two, written originally in Yiddish, I guess as zwei, and in Polish para. And it's the story of a boy who grows up in a shtetl in Poland and wants to be a girl. And it's an unusual story in Izaaka Baszewisa Singera's oeuvre. I think it's one of the only stories where he really imagines what somebody of a non-traditional gender would experience in the specific context of a Jewish village. And I've adapted fragments or large chunks of that story to become the story of a mythological flower that once grew in the Muranowa neighborhood of Warsaw, which is where the museum is. So I kind of take fact and fiction, Singer's story, my own writing, and combine them into a narrative that tells the story and leads the listener outside of the museum and into the neighborhood around the museum. I've worked with the Polin Choir Project. I've worked with Seana Palmera and Kuby Pałysa, and about 12 members of the project who were involved both as narrators for the story and as singers. And with Seana and Kuby, the choir developed a series of beautiful vocalizations that become part of the sort of sonic atmosphere for the story on the audio guide. And they also composed a song about the Muranowa Lily, which they sing at the end. So the story ends with this rousing, beautiful, very layered song about the lily.
The whole process really started to kick off when we realized that we were looking for something that was along the lines of ballad and something which was, let's say something which arrives from the fog. It comes out of something and then it disappears once again. The story that's told through this small sonnet is that of a flower which blooms, but blooms 3 times in its life and then dies. And I wanted this to be repeated or reflected in the music. So we have a motif which appears 3 times. Every time it grows in a slightly different way with different voices. And then the last part of its life, which is the winter, is where the song itself repeats but disappears and disappears and disappears, such as happened with this infamous and legendary, let's say, flower.
It's a project that has a community element to it, working with members of the Polin community and the choir. Part of what made me interested of working with this sort of lost story of Izaaka Baszewisa Singera is that I'm concerned with the way that history is told. There's sort of the canon of what is agreed as the official history of a place or a people. And I think that there are lived experiences and personal stories that maybe don't fit the main narrative of history and that often get lost or forgotten or even suppressed from being told. And I think that the stories of gays and lesbians and transgender people are often the stories that are not recognized, affirmed, repeated. And so it was very special for me to find this story in his large collection of Yiddish writing that has no gayness, no queerness, and to sort of resurrect it and to reinsert it into historical dialogue about, well, what was Polish Jewish life 100 years ago? Who were the characters of that world? And I mean, gays and lesbians, and to a certain degree transgender individuals, have increasing visibility in the contemporary world. I think that for many people, gay and lesbian life and activity feels like a very modern day thing, and people don't understand the presence of gays, lesbians, and transgenders throughout history, really from the beginning of history. And I think it's important to resurrect these stories and to place gay and lesbian life in a historical context. So that's part of the impetus that's part of the motivation for working with this material.